Happy to have you here with me tonight in the locker room, everybody. I'm Alan Locher. Tonight, I am joined by George Moore and Mike Snaric, husbands and dads to twin boys and co-founders of Families Out Loud, an organization dedicated to providing inclusive, trusted education and resources for anyone building a family through IVF or surrogacy. George and Mike created Families Out Loud after navigating this journey themselves and realizing how difficult it can be to find clear, reliable information in what is often an overwhelming and unregulated space. Their mission is to make sure people feel informed, supported, and never alone as they build their families. I also want to mention that earlier this week, I sat down with Days of Our Lives actor Greg Rikaart, who, along with his husband Rob, welcomed their son through surrogacy in 2016. Greg spoke candidly about his road to surrogacy, what was hardest to navigate, what he wishes he'd known earlier, and what he truly believes could truly help families searching for answers. I'll be sharing that conversation shortly, so please stay tuned and please help me welcome George Moore and Mike Snaric to the locker room. Hi, gentlemen.
Hey, how are you?
Hello.
I am well. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us, for sure.
It's my pleasure. Let's start with the big picture. What inspired you to start Families Out Loud? And was there a specific moment or realization during your own journey to parenthood that made you say, we need to create something better?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much, Alan. I really, really appreciate us being here and for having us. Yeah, I think for us, it was a series of moments, right? And there was this series of like these, we need to do something, these ahas, right? So on our own journey, I think we started to feel lost when we just really didn't know who to turn to when we had questions about, our gestational carrier, if everything that she was doing was correct, if everything that our physician was doing was correct. There was no resource, like there was no gay men that we had conversations with in our lives at this point. We didn't know the resources that were available. And I think Google sort of let us down. This was quite a few years ago and AI wasn't really a thing yet. And it really was very difficult for us to find solid information that felt grounded in trust and truth. And it was very ambiguous, and it still is. And then, as I transitioned my professional career into this world, I started to see even more need. As I met with intended parents on an agency side and on the clinic side, there was still this idea that parents were lost, right? But what really expanded my thought process on it was that I was having conversations not only with members of the LGBTQIA plus community, but members of the heterosexual community, singles, non-binary. And I was like, wait a second. All of these individuals are struggling to find this information, and there's really no resource for them. So that's when George and I were like, hold on a second. We really need to create a resource that's for everyone of every lived experience who would like to build their family through assisted reproductive technology.
Yeah, and
It's so beautiful that so many people want to do, like you said. I mean, so many people want to have a child, and what is truly amazing, there are so many single men and women, around the globe, straight or gay, that are doing it and able to do it because of this.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I think the beginning of our journey, obviously really stressful. Like Mike said, we were Googling and going down Reddit rabbit holes, and we just couldn't find quality information. But then even afterwards, like our journey took 3 years, right? And so by the time we got done with that, you're like, it's such whiplash, like going back and forth and going to this clinic and doing this, and finally your babies are here and now you're a dad. And then afterwards, at the end of our journey, people started reaching out to us on Instagram, and we're getting all these messages about, I had no idea that you guys were doing this, or like, what is it like? Where did you start? And so we quickly realized on that end of their journey as well, like, people don't even know where to start. Like, some people didn't even know it was an option for them. Our families had no idea about IVF or surrogacy. And when we both came out, that was the first thing that our parents said to us was, I just wish that you could have kids and you have a family and have that experience. And now, like, I think the more mainstream it becomes, the more we realize, like, a lot of people want to do this. They just don't know where to start.
Yeah. It all starts with the conversation. Well, speaking of conversation, let's jump back. When did you each realize you wanted to have kids? And especially after coming out, did you always believe that the dream could become this reality that you're currently living?
You know, I think every gay person kind of struggles with this. Is like that's like one of the first things that I thought of, and I was like, well, how do I even have a family? Can I have a family? Like, I imagine the nuclear family, right, where it's like you have your wife, 2 kids, picket fence, dog, and that's it. And I'm like, how does that even happen? But when Mike and I first started dating, you know, we went on our first date. Mike just picked me up at Dunkin' Donuts outside my college, and it sounds so creepy.
It
was 16
years now. Oh.
Yeah. 17 years ago.
Yeah.
We met on Grindr. Plug for Grindr.
There you go.
But yeah, we went on our first date, and Mike just like took me to his apartment, and
again, creepy.
I know, creepy. I should have known better. But we like hung out on his couch for like 8 hours and just like talked. And one of the first things we talked about was about like having kids, and I was always very upfront with that when I went on dates with people. And I don't know if you were or not.
I mean, it wasn't the first thing that I talked about, but I think that's why we ended up being together, is because it felt very organic to have a conversation about family and how important family was to us.
And so we bonded over like traditions and Christmas especially, but like really like family traditions and cooking and all these things. And we're like, you know, like I would love to pass that down to children. And like, I'm Italian, Mike's Italian. And so that was like very important to us. And so we clicked on that piece very quickly early on in our relationship.
But I think, and to expand upon that, we didn't know how that was going to be achieved yet.
Yeah.
Right. So like, you know, it was like, well, are we going to adopt? Like, what does that even look like? I'm not quite sure. I mean, I certainly hadn't done any research on IVF or surrogacy or egg donation or anything around that. And so, you know, it wasn't something that was top of mind. And I think it's not something that's really taught in the educational system. No. And a plug for that, because I think that we do need to teach children about, you know, what their options are, fertility preservation options, because as the American populace is struggling with their reproduction, I think that they need to be made aware that there are certain places that you should go if you do feel like you are struggling.
Yeah, and I mean, like you sit in sex ed class in middle school and you're like, these are definitely not the pathways for me, because I'm not interested in that. So, you know, there's a whole self-exploration piece that comes with it. And again, like back then on the internet, like it just was not out there. Yeah.
Wow. Can you take us through the road, your particular road to becoming parents to your beautiful twin boys, James and Anthony? What did the process look like emotionally, practically?
Yeah. So I'll get started. So it all started right around when COVID began, right? And so we really didn't have the plan. So long story short, we were in Seattle for a short period of time. Our jobs brought us out there. And because of COVID, we ended up moving back home to New Jersey, which is where we had our home. And my mom fell really ill during COVID. Thank God, knock wood, she's still here. But it was very near death. And she's older. And she was like, I would really appreciate it if you could maybe think about having children, right? And so like I was in my early 30s, George wasn't in his 30s yet, and George was like, I don't know, like I feel like there's so much more like traveling we want to do together. There's so much more. And you know, when we really talked it through, we said, you know what? One thing that we want to promise each other when we do have children is that we don't want to give up ourselves, and we don't want to give up our lives, and we don't want to give up the gay community. And what that is for us is, you know, hanging out with our friends at the bars in New York City and going to parties and doing things and having a great time. And we realized that like, in order to do that, we would have to have a network of, you know, great babysitters, trusted babysitters, nannies, and things like that. And not everyone has that, but we knew that that was important for us to create for ourselves. So that's really when the conversation started. But then after it started, we were like, okay, now what?
Now where do we start? We don't
know
know any other gay dads.
Yeah.
And spoiler alert, like you're never actually ready to have kids. So everyone's like, oh, I'll just wait until I'm ready. It's never going to happen. So just do it. I think that was like the one thing that like, that's the epiphany that I had, was that there is no right time.
Yeah. And like what we did is like, we Googled surrogacy agencies, New Jersey. Right. And like, we just looked for local surrogacy agencies, which, okay, like we say at Families Out Loud, there's no right or wrong entry point into this entire space, but definitely things being geographically close to where you're living is not the way to think about really, truly beginning the entire journey. but we didn't know that, right? So like that's where we started, and that's what sort of led us down the path to where we are today. Sorry.
Gotcha. Wow. And so, and when the boys are how old now?
They're 3 and they're almost 4 actually. March 5th they'll be 4. Thank you.
Yep.
March 5th they'll be 4 years old. So it's crazy how like they're now older than our entire journey was. So their journey was 3 years. Our journey was 3 years, and now they're already they're 4 on March 5th, which is insane to think about.
Along the way, what would you say was the hardest part about getting the information you need, or trusting that the information you were getting was actually accurate?
I think that's like the theme of our entire journey, right? We didn't know what we didn't know. So we would get into these conversations with people, and like it would sound great, and it felt like we could trust them, and then we ended up falling into like a major pitfall, or we like signed something way too soon, or we were instructed to do something that we probably shouldn't have done, or we were advised incorrectly. And so now, like, coming out on the other side, and like Mike is much more in the industry now because he works at a fertility clinic, but coming out on the other side and talking to people, we realized like we could have avoided and saved so much money, like now knowing what we know now.
Emotional stress. I think that, like, to piggyback off what George was saying, like, you don't know what you don't know, right? And what's so unfortunate about the community is that at times, it's not everyone, and it's a small majority, but it can sometimes feel predatory in nature, right? Like, there are certain entities that know, like, okay, members of the LGBTQIA plus community, if they want to have children, at least in some way, shape, or form, leveraging their own genetic material, then they're going to have to enter it through this particular space. And a lot of members of this community tend to have a little bit more disposable income, some than others. And so what's very frustrating is that as a gay couple, we don't necessarily want to spend the money that we've hard earned and saved on building a family. And so that's why it's really beautiful that there's a lot of legislation that's happening in the United States now, where insurance providers are providing more financial resources for all family types as they're building their families. Because just because we do not have the reproductive parts to achieve it together, try as we might, like, literally, like, it's really, really important to understand that we want people to get behind this legislation, that spending in the United States over $250,000 to build your family isn't fair, right? And this is also for heterosexual couples, because the cost isn't exclusive to same-sex couples, right? However, heterosexual couples are able to prove that they are infertile and do receive a little bit more benefit through their insurance providers, and sometimes through a work provided benefit, which sometimes the LGBT community can benefit from. So this is all to say that we really didn't know about all these different things. And as we entered this space, we became extremely passionate about educating all communities about everything that's available to them, so that they can leverage this information in the best way possible to build their family.
So smart. What you're doing. We've talked a lot about how overwhelming, the space can be. When did it become clear to you that the lack of regulation and vetted resources wasn't just frustrating, but potentially harmful? Was there a moment for that you must see it in the conversations you're having with other people now.
Yeah. I mean, you can talk about the major, like, the Sero connection stuff.
Well, I think so. There's a few things. Number one, we experienced it, right? So
I thought you meant like recently, but yes, you can talk about it.
You're right, though. It's through everything, right? Like, at first we experienced it through, as a same-sex couple, you have to get what's called a pre-birth order, right? And what a pre-birth order is that is saying that George and I are legally the parents of our children before they're born, in whatever state they are born in. And so just because we're a same-sex couple, we actually have to get that documentation. Unlike when a couple conceives a child naturally, they're both just on the birth certificate. Mm-hmm. So what ends up happening is the gestational carrier's name never actually lands on the birth certificate. It is the intended parents, in our case, George and myself, who are on the birth certificate in advance. What happened to us, however, is our gestational carrier lived in the state of New Mexico, which is, plug, a wonderful state for gestational surrogacy. However, because our sons were born...
Why is that?
So number one, wonderful healthcare. So access to healthcare, great hospitals, great insurance benefits, lower insurance costs, lower cost gestational carriers as compared to other states, because the cost of living in New Mexico isn't as high as it is in other states like California, for example. So that's just some things why some other states tend to be a little bit less costly than others.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for, because I think that's important. I mean, the fact that you're recommending it, good for people to know why.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you for bringing it up. So what ended up happening is that our children were born at 30 weeks, so 2 months early. And they had to be airlifted to a hospital that was a level 4 NICU, because the hospital where they were born was only a level 2 NICU. And their NICU was in the state of Texas, where in Texas, we did not have legal parentage rights to our children. So when they transferred our children there, they transferred them under our gestational carrier's name. So our children had our gestational carrier's last name attached to them. So legally, in the state of Texas, George and I were not the parents of our children. Therefore, we were not allowed to enter the NICU to see our children.
Oh my
So
God.
when we got there, we had to call our attorney, who had to get on the phone with a judge in Texas and say, hi, my clients have a birth order in the state of New Mexico. You need to recognize this document, please, and sign off that they are the legal parents. So we sat in the waiting room
For hours
as we waited for a judge in Texas to tell us that we could see our children. So this is what gay couples go through as they try to, and we're not the only couple, right? And so like, that's number one. Right?
And no one warned us about that. Like no one told us. So that was another thing.
I mean, that emotional for you guys, I am sorry, you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was our lived experience, right? But it taught us like what are some things that, you know, could go wrong, right? And, you know, could be an issue. And so like it was really important. That was our first moment. And then obviously there's a lot of things that can go wrong in this journey. And I always tell couples when I meet with them, all intended families, that no journey is perfect. There's no path to parenthood that's perfect. Even for heterosexual couples who are conceiving naturally, right? Like every single pregnancy is different, regardless if you have 1, 2, 3, 4 children, right? Everything is different. However, as you're going through this process, there are so many hiccups that can happen, right? What are some examples of hiccups that can happen? Well, I mean, you know, you're a gestational carrier. I've heard of gestational carriers who've gotten to a fender bender, right? Like it's not a severe car accident, but you're living in a different state. You're panicking. Oh my gosh, is my child okay? You know, what's going on? There are things where you match with your gestational carrier and it's not open enrollment season for the ACA policy when you are purchasing insurance for your gestational carrier. So what do? Your gestational carrier is uninsured. Well, there's a ton of different options and things that you can do. You can either cash pay for the medical charges. You can get, some states have short-term policies where you can do it for several months, or you can get a larger, like overarching policy. It's called the Lloyd's of London policy, which is extremely expensive. And that's not something that is necessarily best for all families, but that's some examples. And the other thing is that when it comes to trust and matching with the best entities possible, recently there was a surrogacy agency that did something where they held the escrow funds for families internally in their own bank, in their own organization.
Which even sounds like a conflict of interest if you think about it.
Right.
And that particular agency went under and took all of the funds, the over $5 million of funds from the intended parents along with them.
Who were in all different stages of their journey. So people had children that were about to be born in a few weeks. Some people had just started and put their whole life savings in there. So I think that's like, and it's all unregulated. So that's the scariest part, is like, unless you get like referred into somewhere or someone's guiding you through the process, like you don't know. And that's why at like our Families Out Loud events, we have sponsors there that we have approved of, right? And that we know personally, like we know these are good people. And so that's why we're trying to create this community of like the best of the best at our events, so you don't have to fear that you're going to get scammed out of all of your money or scammed with a terrible surrogate or whatever the case is.
And I think to even go further, not only is it George and I vetting, it's we now have a board that's comprised of physicians, attorneys,
Agency
mental health
owners.
professionals, agency owners. And so we've created a rubric whereby anyone who is partnering with Families Out Loud has to adhere to this particular rubric. And there are safety nets and protocols that anyone who is partnering with us, we make sure that we are only presenting the highest quality agencies and clinics and third-party providers to anyone who's embarking upon this entire process. Because yes, so much of this is ethics and so much of this is morality. But as an intended parent, you are placing your trust. And, you know, some people will say, well, oh, you know, you can't run a business on emotion. I disagree, right? Like, I think that you have to understand, maybe it's the Cancerian part of me, but like, I really do think that your intended parents that you're speaking with, they need to trust you. And you are entrusted with their trust.
We're in the business of making babies. So like, of course there's emotion. Most of it's emotion.
Right.
So, I mean, it definitely has to come into play when you think about this stuff.
And at the core of everything that we do at Families Out Loud, at everything that I do with the clinic that I work for, is the children. Every single day I wake up and I say to myself, today a child is being born that to a family that wasn't able to even conceive that they could have a child, right? Because of conversations that either we had or I had or George had.
Like, this baby is so intentional. It's actually heartwarming to know that like people want to have babies still, and like they're willing to go through all of this. Some people just have like it's just not even, I don't know if it's bad luck. It's just the worst situations sometimes. And you know, a lot of it's just like the wrong doctor, or you're not set up for success with the way that your embryos were created, or whatever the case is. You know, I think that's what
I can't imagine the emotional roller coaster. You know, so many factors that you're not really in control of, except maybe this, picking the smartest, you know, organizations to work with. And speaking of that, there are a number of other, you know, family building conferences out there, but Families Out Loud feels intentionally different. How conscious were you about creating a space that truly supports all families, not just LGBTQIA, while also holding firm about your ethical standards around who you allow in the room and partner with?
Yeah, I think, you know, the way that we thought about it, the way we approached it was like, we want to be something different. We really wanted to like disrupt the space, right? Because we went to conferences in the past that, you know, you would go to once, twice, 3 times and still not have the information that you're looking for, because it was so overwhelming. It's, you know, you approach a sea of all these providers and you're like, I don't even know who's who does what. And you know, you struggle to like really get any of the information that you want. And so that was one of the main things. I'm trying to think of what else.
I mean, ultimately, listen, there's a space for everyone, right? And I think that there's value in every single conference and in every single meeting for everyone. But one thing that George and I, and why we were passionate about creating Families Out Loud, is that for me, when I was having clinical conversations with individuals, so many of them being single men, single women, and members of the heterosexual community, it really impacted me when I would speak with someone who identified as a woman and said to me, you know, oh, my partner's not on the call because, you know, we're embarrassed. And my heart would break from the start of the call, because like already they're starting out at an emotional deficit, right? Like they don't have a partner that's necessarily dedicated to what it is that this individual in front of me that I'm having a conversation with is going through, right? And they've been through multiple rounds of failed IVF, and they're really struggling to build a family. They've been trying so hard. And now, you know, they're coming to whether they need to leverage donor tissue in form of an egg donor or a sperm donor or a gestational carrier, right? They're no longer able to carry because of maybe, God forbid, they had cancer or, you know, too many miscarriages or whatever it may be, right? Like, these are the people that need so much help because they had no expectation that they were going to have to leverage this entire community at all. Whereas a lot of members of the LGBTQIA+ community, you sort of know, like, okay, like at least now, like at some point we're going to have to do this. But members of the heterosexual community, no idea, right? Like, try as they might, they're not able to get pregnant.
And when we first embarked on Families Out Loud, it was mainly just for other gay couples, LGBTQ, and that was it was like exclusively that, right? And we were like, this is the community that needs the help the most. This is the community that we know the best. So like, let's like, that's what we're going to embark on. And then slowly, as we started having events, we would see like heterosexual couples trickle in, and we're like, oh, like this is interesting. Like, let's explore this more. And then there was one event, was it DC? I think it was DC, where two heterosexual couples came up to us separately after the event. And the one gentleman who came with his wife, and he was in tears. And he was like, my wife and I have been like fighting about this. And, I was about to like throw up my hands and give up because we had no idea how to figure this thing out.
And like their friend saw our website and was like, you guys should go check this out.
Yeah. And I don't think they thought it was only for, LGBTQ folks, but like they were like, we're just going to give it a shot and come. And they signed up with an agency. They found their egg donor. They did everything at Families Out Loud. And like they got through what would have taken them probably a year on their own to do in a day. And then another couple came out to us too and said the same exact thing. And they're like, there is no place for us like this with this information outside of just Googling. And we're like, we hear you, we've been there, and we know exactly what it's like. And so that's when it kind of hit us that we're like, okay, we need to open this up to everybody. And so not that we didn't want to, we just didn't realize that there was a need for it. And so that's when the
name is intentional.
Wheel started. Yeah.
I mean, the name is
but those are, the bright spots of what you created. Like you don't, it's sort of your journey to parenthood. You don't know what you don't know until you start going through, and you didn't know others could benefit from what you were creating, which is so fantastic. As you both know, I sat down with Days of Our Lives, Greg Rikaart, earlier this week, who also, along with his husband, Rob, welcomed their son through surrogacy. And I think, you'll hear him talk about a lot of the same things they didn't know, but, things he wouldn't change. So I want to share that conversation now, and then we'll come back to hear your reactions, especially if, he shares anything that resonates or reflects the gaps you're working to fill with Families Out Loud. So let's, everybody, please welcome Greg Rikaart.
Awesome.
Well, you've really been open about becoming a father through surrogacy. When you look back on that process now, here we are in 2026, what stands out to you most, especially about what you didn't expect or weren't prepared for?
Great question. I wish, frankly, that we had more resources as far as like information available to us. We had some friends who had gone through the surrogacy journey before us, but they were working with a different agency, so that wasn't as we had some information, but again, I think some more would have been helpful. I think I would have been better prepared had we known how long the process was going to take. I think something that I figured out once the experience was winding down was that for these agencies, at least for the one that we were working for, but I think it's true for all of them, it's very transactional because it is a business to them. And it is an odd experience when you are embarking on something that is one of the, if not the most sort of emotionally charged moments or experiences in your life with someone for where it is just so transactional. I think is led us on more than one occasion to feel a little bit like we were kind of on our own and having to figure out some difficult things without much help. So, like I said, some more resources on that front would have certainly been helpful.
Did you feel you actually had access to clear and trustworthy information, or did you feel like you were piecing it together yourselves?
I feel like we were piecing it together ourselves. I mean, some of the concerns were just so personal that, frankly, there wasn't a whole lot of help that we could have really even used from outside sources. I mean, the example that comes to mind most clearly is we had the opportunity to we had the option of whether or not we wanted to meet in person our egg donor, and we had found her obviously through this agency, and we had seen photos of her and this really charming video, and we're so taken by her and really liked the idea of meeting her face to face. But then we're also very concerned about our future child or children's autonomy and their privacy, and I think that was something we grappled with and really sort of had to figure out on our own. And maybe if there were more resources on that front, and if we had more people to talk to who had made one of those two choices, maybe that would have helped us. Or maybe it's something we just needed to figure out personally.
Yeah, you said you got, some answers from a friend. Did you try finding some of this online as well? Was there just no information?
Well, no, I think we certainly got some information online. The agency that we worked with had, they were reputable and they had resources and on their website that, but some of these decisions were so personal that there really wasn't a whole lot of places to look to find the answer that we really just had to find for ourselves, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it totally does. I don't know if you remember, but were there questions that felt hardest to get answers to early on?
I don't know. Like, are you thinking of something in particular?
No, I just curious if, as you're figuring out something that is, like you said, so personal.
Probably started 11 or 12 years ago because it took so long. Yeah. I wouldn't say answers to questions that were hard to find out, but I remember the learning curve of understanding that if we implanted one embryo, once we had embryos, I mean, this started with, first we had to find an egg donor, right? And that's the whole process of first creating embryos, which took us, we had to do 2 separate rounds. So the whole process of retrieval, creating the embryos, all of that was at least a year long. And then first getting paired with a surrogate took another year. So I think that would have, having the clarity of like just how long this process can take or might take would have been helpful, because we certainly didn't have that when we got started. And
I'm sure that's got to be emotional in and of itself, that time.
Yeah. Like I remember we got something like 7 or 8 eggs from the first retrieval, which and by the way, you're dealing with the agency, you're dealing with the fertility doctor. So there are a lot of chefs in the kitchen. And the suggestion from the doctor was to do a second round, which none of which is inexpensive at all, because it's not just, it's very expensive.
Yeah.
And then on the second retrieval, we got something like 26 or 28 eggs. And I'm like, man, had this just happened the first time, we only would have had to do it once. Yeah. But anyway, you live, you learn. And that sort of leads in, hindsight being 2020. If you could go back, is there anything you would have done differently about the journey at any point? I mean, it's hard to say, right? Because at the end you look at your family, and I wouldn't change anything about my family.
Right.
I would have some suggestions or notes for the agency that we worked with about, I understand it is transactional, but a little more care for your clients, I think, is something that, and we worked with more than one agency, because I don't know if you know this, but we also tried after we had Monty for years to have another child, and it just never seemed to be in the cards. So we worked with more than one agency, and it is it's hard because you're dealing with again, it's a very emotionally charged experience, and you're dealing with finding out whether or not you're pregnant or not, or miscarriages, and all of these things that are so charged. And for them, it's a business, and they're just trying to keep their business going. And I understand it, but it's also it's hard.
Yeah, and you just said, I mean, the emotional and psychological aspect. Are there things you wish people talked about more, or maybe it's that the time, the time it takes?
Yeah,
Because
I
that's
think
an emotional impact on you, right?
sure. I think that like if I ran an agency that helped intended parents match with surrogates and egg donors and have families, I would make it front and center that we have somebody on. I would make sure there was somebody there to deal with all of the, pretty much all the things that I'm talking about, where it felt like we had to figure out a lot for on our own, or someone there to help navigate the challenges of finding out you're not pregnant, or finding out that you are pregnant and then your surrogate miscarries, all of those things, which I think which are all things we dealt with, we sort of found ourselves dealing with by ourselves, which was hard. I mean, it would have been hard regardless, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And George and Mike, what they're trying to build with Families Out Loud is creating inclusive spaces where you have the two parents who are going through the process with vetted resources and agencies all in one room with real, I think, parent voices, so that they can get all of those answers in one place.
Yeah, that's great.
That's really, I think, their mission, because of, I think some of the same struggles that they had in
I'm
figuring
sure.
it out.
Yeah.
If you could offer one piece of guidance to George and Mike as they continue growing this, what would you want them to keep front and center for families just starting out?
I mean, it sounds like they're doing a lot of things correctly already, just having the space for people to go and sort of get these answers. I think, again, dealing with the agencies, maybe just having clear expectations of what to rely on those people for and what not to. And then I guess secondarily, something else that we had to kind of figure out on our own was that once we were pregnant, our surrogate, who was and is amazing, you're entering into this very, very intimate relationship with someone who is some at the beginning of the experience a stranger, which is very, very different from the way heteronormative families are made, right? It's you find someone that you want to partner with and then build a family together, whereas here we meet a stranger and say, please host our embryo inside of you for 9 months. So that creates something of an interesting road to hoe to navigate that relationship, and because it's so intimate, and also you're starting out as strangers. So I think, I think maybe focusing on that somewhat and making sure that is something that parents understand going into it, that is a relationship that needs to be figured out pretty clearly.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. The trust. I mean, the trust on both sides, right? It's just on both sides.
Trust, and also,
before I let you know,
sorry, go on.
Yeah, go. No.
Well, I was going to say, I think one of the challenges for Rob and me was also, again, not having been in relationships with women who were pregnant and their bodies are changing and they are hormonal, all things that are understandably normal parts of being pregnant. I think having to navigate that was somewhat challenging for us too, and giving Marcella, our surrogate, the space and love and care that she needed through that, and also having patience with her when she was emotional about certain things, and also one other thing I would suggest is the experience of towards the end of the pregnancy, I think is especially hard on the surrogates, because one can't help but bond with this baby that's growing inside of you, and then the relationship, I don't want to say it ends, but it is certainly different from what it is like to birth a child that you are bringing home to raise. And I think, and by the way, every surrogate, at least if you're one who's working for an agency, has to have birthed a child before you can be a surrogate. I think no doctor would approve you to be a surrogate if they don't know that you are capable of being pregnant, if you are someone who enjoys being pregnant. So I think that's a really challenging experience for the surrogates too, is to leave the hospital without a baby.
Absolutely. I didn't know that fact about having to have had
which makes sense,
birth.
right? You know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it also brings a certain type of woman who really, you know, either feels great throughout a pregnancy or just loves the experience of being pregnant, which some women do and some women do not.
Very true. For anyone watching tonight who's just beginning to explore surrogacy or IVF, is there one thing you'd want them to hear right now?
I mean, it's very exciting. Like the whole thing, even warts and all, with the ups and downs and the challenges. Like there's a million ways to make a family. Maybe not a million, but there's a lot. And when you asked earlier if I would do anything different, I think ultimately the answer is no, because we have a great kid and a great family. And if it wasn't for everything that we went through to get here, it would be something else. So no, it's all very exciting, and I love that there appears to be a bigger space with more answers available for the people who are starting out now. So it seems like a really exciting time.
Absolutely. Thank you for always being open to talk about this, because I really
my pleasure.
Helps people. It helps
Happy
people.
to be here.
Thanks, Greg. Stay well.
And we're back.
And we're back. Hold on. Something's not working correctly. Let's see.
That's okay. Mike's got to take a child break anyway, so that works.
Okay, there we are. There we are. Anyway, yeah, sorry, I couldn't get that
That's
working.
Okay.
Well, listening to Greg talk about his experience, did something stand out to you? I mean, I think really he was saying a lot of the things that you both were saying earlier.
That's what we were saying. We're like, you know, it's sad that it is so prevalent that people have these types of experiences, and we hear it constantly. It's either an issue with your doctor or an issue with the surrogacy agency or the egg donation agency. And sometimes it's the trifecta of like all of those things kind of collapsing on you. But one thing that I think stuck out to me the most was the relationship with the surrogate, right? And so at Families Out Loud events, what we want to start doing is having gestational carriers come to our events to speak about their experience, because I think that's one thing that no one really prepares you for as the intended parents. You know, going into this, you do just meet a perfect stranger, right? And you get to see them on paper, and then you kind of interview them either via Zoom or sometimes in person, and you're just like trusting this person. It's really just the honor system. And, you know, there's blood tests and all that kind of stuff that happen along the way as they go for their checkups, but you're really like, please don't drink coffee, or like, just try to eat healthy. And, you are really trying hard to like trust this person. Yeah. And, Mike and I are pretty laid back people, but at the same time, you're like, those are my kids in there. And, it's a little nerve wracking. And you want to also build this special relationship because, the way that Mike and I saw this was like, we want our kids to be able to have a relationship with our surrogate, from a distance. And, she follows us on Instagram. We still talk all the time. And we want our boys to be able to know or meet or talk to the person that ultimately brought them into this world. We thought that was really special.
And that's your choice, because not everybody feels the same way, know, and I get that, everybody has, but I do love, and I've come across it through my own friends who've done it through surrogacy, or people I don't know who are sharing on Instagram like yourselves, of that connection, because it really can be a beautiful connection.
Yeah, it definitely is. And on the day that our boys were born, our surrogate like texted us and she's like, can I come like meet them? Because they were born and they were actually just airlifted to another hospital because
she didn't even get to see them.
She didn't even get to see them because they needed to go to a level 4 NICU. And so they had to be airlifted immediately. Like one of them was blue. The other one was like, they were just barely hanging on because they were 2 months. They were 10 weeks early. And so they had to go straight to the NICU. And so she texts us, she's like, can I meet them? And we're like, of course, like you just carried these kids for however long.
30 weeks.
You should absolutely meet them. And so I think one of us went in with her because there's only 2 people allowed in at the time.
Yeah.
Because they were in the incubators. But it was great. And like, I mean, we were both like probably like hysterical crying when she met them, because it's such a special, selfless act that one human can do for another.
I mean, the gift of life, really. I mean, that's I can't even imagine that. Did anything Greg share reinforce why Families Out Loud needs to exist?
The whole thing,
literally. So I was sitting here, I'm listening to him, and I'm like, oh my god. So it worked perfectly. Like you couldn't have asked for a better segue.
I wish we knew Greg before he started his journey.
Yeah. So a few things. Number one, I just want to piggyback off something that George said, and that you mentioned when it comes to gestational carriers. What a lot of people don't realize is the moment your child is born, your gestational carrier isn't allowed to touch your child, ask any questions about them, or get any information about them. They lose any single right? So while they're carrying them, it is still their body, and they do have some decision-making powers because it is within their own body. However, when your child is born, your child is your child, right? Like that is the entire idea of like the birth certificate and the pre-birth order, or like second parent adoption and all these different methods for parentage. But a lot of people don't realize that, because that's one of the largest misconceptions, especially, and I hate to say it like this, but intended mothers, a lot of women are like, well, what if she gets attached? Like, what if can she say like, and the answer is she can't, right? And the hospitals, they know that. And so like the minute that your child is born, the hospital asks, is it okay? Do you mind if your gestational carrier, holds your child? Which feels like so strange and so awkward. But, a lot of intended parents, there's a lot of different feelings out there, and not to say that anything is right or anything is wrong, but for lots of gestational carriers that George and I have met through Families Out Loud and, on our own, it is a nice full circle moment for a gestational carrier. There is some, like Greg was like talking about,
a tie at the end,
Exactly. You're closing the loop with your gestational carrier when they're holding your child, and you've done it together, and you're all in that space, and it's just this magical moment.
We got our surrogate like a push present. We sent her like Mother's Day stuff. Like we wish her Happy Mother's Day all the time, every year. We wanted a very special relationship for sure. But yeah, like you said, it's different for everybody.
But like getting back to the actual question you just asked, which was, it was stuff that he said really in like solidify why you created Families Out Loud. The answer is yes. So like number one, feeling like your agency is a business and like you're a number. And so like I always counsel intended parents when I speak with them on the clinical side and when I speak with them at Families Out Loud, overarching on the journey. You need to partner with a third party, whether it's a clinic, a donor agency, a sperm donor agency, an attorney, a surrogacy agency. You shouldn't feel like a number ever, right? And that's why you should have as many consultations as is required for you to have a good feeling and resonance with the person and the organization that you're speaking with. And so I always counsel intended parents when I'm speaking with them, and I always say to them, listen, there's large corporate surrogacy agencies, and they are wonderful places for some intended parents. But other intended parents, and it sounds like Greg was this style of intended parent, would have benefited from a more bespoke, hand-holding, smaller agency that doesn't take on a large number of intended parents, that's able to have a ton of email, phone, and internet communication with them, really explain the entire process, and go through it. I think sometimes, when parents are very busy individuals and they're CEOs and CFOs, and they don't really have time for a lot of, emails and whatnot, but they do still want to build their family, perhaps a larger organization is better suited for them. But when someone wants to have a certain level of involvement and interaction in the process, which it sounds like Greg and his partner Rob did,
which is totally fine,
which is completely fine. And that's how Families Out Loud and George and I tend to think about the process. We do partner with larger agencies because we want to present all options,
spectrum
to our
all
families.
the different options. Yeah.
But I think that that's one thing, is that Greg sounded like
it sounds like you've spoken to that agency. So you do, even if they're larger, they, you trust that they are going to treat, their
correct, right? Like they're not going to feel like you're just the number, right? But you're not going to necessarily have the same touch point. So what I mean by that is there's an agency that we partner with where the owner flies to the birth for the surrogate and is there as an emergency resource. She doesn't charge you. She literally goes, and God forbid anything happens, something with the paperwork, something with the gestational carrier, something with anything, she's there for the intended parents and for the surrogate. Like, that is the kind of agency that it sounds like Greg would have benefited from, right? Like,
I sign up.
Yeah, right. And so, like, that's the level of handholding that some agencies do provide. Not all, and frankly, not most.
And some people don't want that level. It was just, another
Right.
option.
Yeah, it's just another way that you think about the process. However, I do think that it shouldn't feel like a business transaction, right? And that's what we were talking about at the beginning of our call, where I do think that there are a lot of organizations, regardless of what it is that they're doing in the assisted reproductive technology world, that have lost sight of what we talked about, where the child is at the center, right? Thinking about the fact that we are creating life and we are building families. And when you think about that, it's very, very hard to make it feel like a business. It is emotional, right? And it does become about trust. And so, feeling like it was transactional really, it bothered me when Greg was talking about that, because I hated that he and Rob had that interaction. It kind of broke my heart when I thought about it. The other thing is, and it made my blood boil a little bit, is with his donor, right? So thankfully no clinic or physician was named, but that's another reason why it's important to partner with the best quality clinic, because I can tell you from the clinical side, that physician,
there's a little something suspicious there.
Well, that physician didn't properly medicate that egg donor, right? And so the reason why the first retrieval didn't result in the yield was because either A, the donor potentially perhaps didn't medicate appropriately, or the physician didn't properly instruct, or the nurse didn't properly instruct or give the correct protocol to that donor. The fact that we resulted in a lower number of eggs first and then over 20, as Greg alluded to after, leads me to believe that it's a little bit more of a clinical error than a personal or donor induced error. So like, that's where partnering with a clinic that's vetted, that's been around for a long time, having conversations with your doctor of what their success rates are, and whatnot, is extremely important.
Yeah. And you speaking to that part of it is now from your working at a fertility organization, right? That's where you're getting all of that.
Exactly.
Yes, which
So
is impressive.
I have the luxury of literally having interactions with 6 different reproductive endocrinologists, all who have been physicians for over 20 years. So collectively over 100 years of experience between all of them. And I've learned a lot from them, and they've taught me a lot. And together we've seen thousands of different manifestations of experiences with donors or surrogates. And that's why I love what I do, because every single day when you say, well, I've seen it all, you haven't, right? Like, there's always something different that comes up, or a new challenge or a new hurdle. But, getting back to what Greg and Rob endured through the process, and I use the word endured because I don't really feel like anyone should have to feel like they did, which is why Families Out Loud exists. And that if Greg and Rob were able to come to Families Out Loud, perhaps they may have had some different, if not outcomes, sentiments, right? Like, I think that they may have partnered with an agency that they felt more confident in. And also that helps with the potential of negative outcomes, right? When you have someone holding your hand, he felt abandoned from a multitude of different aspects. He didn't have the clinical support. He didn't have the agency support. And he felt kind of alone. It didn't sound like his gestational carrier got like the right closure even from their agency.
Right.
And it made my heart
That's
hurt.
what I was going to say. Like, even the most complex situations, like the journey through it does not have to be like terrible. Like, just because the situation is complex, like, if you have the right team that's guiding you and explaining things and giving you all the risks up front, like, that's so helpful. And I think that was a big miss for us, was like, we just didn't know the risks. And like, at Families Out Loud, like, we really walk people through, like, sure, like, you can have twins, but like, here's all the risks that are involved with that. But like, we're the first people that are going to tell you, like, we love having twins. Like, yes, like, do it if you want it. But there's a lot that goes into that, and like, being prepared for those things. And a lot of the agencies that we work with, a lot of the even like the lawyers, like, all of them, like, they really prep you really well through like the Q&A panels at Families Out Loud. And so hearing, Greg and Rob struggle through all of that, like a lot of that could be avoided by being educated on this stuff.
Yeah, it also makes me think of, when people are going through medical issues, cancer, just having that right team that you trust is so important.
No, go ahead.
That's what I'm. Having had parents who had cancer at times and hospital too many times, having those that you trust on your team it makes a world of difference.
And something that George and I really hone in on at Families Out Loud is mental health. And that's something that Greg alluded to, not so directly, but that really caught my attention, was that we have a mental health provider on almost every single panel. So from the very beginning of the journey, when you're thinking about starting, to the egg donor side, the surrogate side, because mental health becomes a component at every point.
And for both, for the surrogate, for
everyone,
the donor, everyone.
Right. And so like what a lot of people don't understand is that the intended families need to have a conversation. It's required. They have a conversation with a mental health provider. Donors have their conversations. Surrogates have their conversations. And so, Greg and Rob and their gestational carrier should have felt as though they could have reached out to a mental health provider when they felt like there was a lot of things that were going awry, or when they felt like there was a lack of support. So it also doesn't sound like they were partnered with a really solid team, right? And that's why when Greg was saying that, it felt very antiquated, like he was project managing his own journey. That is not how it should feel. You should not have to project manage your own journey.
If you have a well-rounded team, it should not feel like you're managing this whole thing by yourself.
Well, you have an event coming up in February 6th, I believe it begins, right?
Yep. 6th and the 7th in Dallas, Texas.
So what can people expect when they walk into one of these events, especially someone who, might feel overwhelmed or unsure where to begin?
Yeah. I would say like what to expect is like a very safe environment. Like it's very fun. It's very light. Like it's very much like we're very chill people. And so that's the type of environment that we like. It's very approachable. And what they should know is that everyone else in that room, most of the people, it's their jobs and like it's their livelihood. So they're very well versed, but they're also very comfortable talking about it. Like this is not a taboo subject. Any question is fair game. Any situation is fair game. And so it's a very open, inclusive environment. So if anyone has any reservations about coming that's watching it, like let them go. I promise you will feel so comfortable. And if you already know 2 people that are going to be in the room, so you can always come approach us first. We literally obviously love talking about all of this stuff. We're very passionate about it and are literally just here to
help. Well, that comes across, guys. Is the event for people just starting out to ask questions, or also for people deeply, into the process?
Yeah, I mean, any stage. You could have had kids 10 years ago. If you want to come ask a question. If you want to have kids in 10 years, still come. Like the more that you know about the process, the better you can be prepared for when you want to start. So like we tell everyone, our friends who are like, oh, I'm not even thinking about having kids, maybe in like 10 years. Well, you know what? Like, did you know that the first step that you want to take is probably freezing your sperm then? Or like get your sperm tested. And for a gay man, at least, people don't realize that there's little incremental steps you can take as well to start to set yourself up for success. Freezing your eggs, like all of these things that like you can do now. Maybe your job right now offers a benefit that maybe you're thinking about leaving your job in another year, but like take advantage of it now. Like there's these little steps that, and we are all about saving money. We love saving money. So we're happy to help you there too. So you never know what you'll learn unless you come.
Yeah. And I think,
conversations, having the place to talk. Well, I can't let you go without talking about your boys, James and Anthony, and what fatherhood means to both of you. Tell us what, you said they're going to be 4. What are they into?
Oh my God.
Paw Patrol and dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs. Right, yeah. Paw Patrol and dinosaurs. I think, and it's so many of our friends, when we go out, they ask us the question of like, what is it like? I don't think there's actually any words or rhetoric that can truly prepare you or that you can share other than it is a love that you didn't quite understand was possible, right? Like you love your parents and you love your dogs and you love your significant other, but it's a completely different feeling. And what I mean by that is that it's this utter selflessness, right? Like you look at this individual and you were like, I would do anything for
I
this
will
individual.
jump in front of the train for you right now.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the most surprising aspects to becoming a parent. And also like the things that you would enjoy, right? Like I think the things that we thought we knew we'd enjoy, like Christmas and like baking cookies together and, you know, all those traditional things and like making Sunday sauce and all of that. But like I love reading the bedtime story at night. Like that's like one of my favorite moments of the entire day. Did I think that was going to be my favorite moment?
Of course not.
Right? Like I didn't think that like reading a bedtime story is going to be my favorite, but it's like, you know, everything's quiet and everyone's calm. And it's just sort of beautiful moment where we're together as a family and like the dogs are in the room. And it's just so cool. And like you take a step back for 1 second, it's almost like an out of body experience. And it's like, well, how did we get here? It's surreal. And it's also, there's sometimes we talk to our friends also who have children. We're like, I sometimes can't believe that I am in charge of another human being. Like, well, I'm the parent.
Wait, we're supposed to be the responsible ones?
But I think, you know, what I would say to anyone who's thinking about this is that you can do it, right? Like it may sound scary, it may feel scary, but there's this innate thing that comes out in you. Like even whether you're a gay man or a straight man, you almost just sort of know what to do. You innately understand what your child needs, what your child wants, and you know, you're programmed for it, right? And I think that even as gay men, we're programmed for it, right? Like just because we may be homosexuals, it doesn't matter. And that's what's just so like, you know, forget about the people that say anything otherwise. Like I think that arguably we make amazing parents. And I think that we do our best to provide incredible environments for our children. And, you know, we love sharing our life with them.
Yeah, I think that Mike mentioned like dogs. Like before kids, we were very much dog people. We had 3 dachshunds, obsessed with our dogs. Like I thought I would jump in front of a train for our dog. Like you take that love and multiply it by like 100. Like it is just a completely different love. And also just like the experience, the human experience of like seeing your little DNA person walking around. It's so wild to experience that. And like, so Anthony is biologically my genetics and James is biologically Mike's, but they have the same egg donor. So like we have each a mini me of us walking around and we see ourselves in our children.
For better or worse.
Yeah, like the good and the bad. And it's very reflective and it's an amazing experience. And it's also an amazing experience for our family. Like having little kids like changed our entire family. Like my parents, his parents, our brothers and sisters, and like it changes a family dynamic and it makes holidays special. It makes everything so special and kind of like reignites that in like it's a ripple effect. And it's just so lovely. And we love being parents and we love documenting it. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I'm oversharing way too much on Instagram. But I feel like it's good. Like we're really proponents of like visibility and showing people that like you can do all of this. And yes, like Mike said, it's scary. It feels like the process is going to take forever. But like 7 years ago, we were sitting at a kitchen table, Zooming with, an agency being like, we want to start the process. And like, here we are, our kids are almost 4. It's wild.
It happens so fast.
Time just goes by. Guys, thank you so much. I love what you're doing. Keep it up. What time is Sunday sauce?
Sunday sauce normally, I mean, it depends right on what's going on. Normally it's served at around 6. So if you're in the New Jersey area.
Continued success. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us again.
Stay well.
Bye.
Thanks everybody for watching. My thanks to George Moore and Mike Snaric for sharing the important work they're doing through Families Out Loud, and to Greg Rikaart for his openness and generosity in sharing his family's surrogacy journey. If you'd like more information on upcoming Families Out Loud events, visit familiesoutloudevents.com. please join me tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern when I welcome All My Children's Jean Leclerc. We'll be talking about All My Children, loving his work with Kate Collins and Jeannie Francis, and his remarkable career on stage and screen. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, please remember to subscribe, like, and turn on the notifications. For even more, you can check out YouTube memberships and the podcast versions of The Locker Room and Conversations with Alan on your favorite podcast platforms. Thank you again for spending this time with me. As always, stay safe, and I'll see you tomorrow night right here in The Locker Room.